Section 3 of Pantheisticon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Leni. Pantheisticon by John Toland. Of the Ancient and Modern Societies of the Learned, Sections 10 to 13. From this coincidence of extremes, the pantheists deduce a certain third, and truly wonderful motion of the earth, which is to be measured by the progress of the equinoctial points, the fixed showing it to a demonstration, and therefore by the flow, by continued declination of the meridian line. The axis of the earth, I say, rolls without ceasing, always parallel to itself, about the pole of the ecliptic, from which it is distant, in every place, 23 degrees and a half, inclining to the plane of the ecliptic, and the equinoxes by degrees proceed to the southern parts, having nothing to do with the ecliptic. Than this there cannot be a clearer demonstration, founded upon the observations of Aristarchus, Eudoxus, Hipparchus, Ptolemy, Copernicus, Halley, and other excellent ancient and modern astronomers, so that, when the equinoxes come to the tropic of Capricorn, there's a necessity of their proceeding farther to the Antarctic pole, and so afterwards by turning about to the Arctic. We Britons in reality are more remote now from the Arctic pole than in the time of Pytheas the Massilian, although the eighth sphere is at so great a distance from the earth that the diversities, magnitudes, and oppositions of the celestial appearances described by ancient astronomers seem not so much changed to the senses throughout the course of 2000 years and upwards, but that we have in effect come nearer to the Antarctic pole. Not only the seasons of the year, by little and little altered by the progress of the equinoxes, are a testimony, but also a milder temperateness of the same seasons proceeding from hence, which evidently appears from history and the authority of observations. This third motion, which I call equinoctial, to distinguish it from the diurnal and annual motion of the earth, proceeding gradually from east to west, brings matters so to pass that the sphere called the eighth, or the region of visible fixed stars, though immovable, might seem, nevertheless, to go from west to east, so that, whether the eighth sphere moves over the poles of the ecliptic in consequentia, or whether there is a progress of the equinoxes in antecedentia, the appearances will be the same, and all the same things will affect our sight. This phenomenon should be explained the same way as the other motions of the earth, formerly attributed to the sun and planets, and it must be rescued from the absurdities of prating cavillers, both which we have sufficiently acquitted ourselves of in the third book of Esoterics. As a natural consequence of this equinoctial motion, every particle of our globe, the same may be said of the other planets, must, in the course of ages, undergo all sorts of adventures and vicissitudes. This inclination of the meridian, says every pantheist, shows that the axis of the earth does not always pass through opposite parts. Whence it comes to pass that by little and little, and insensibly different and different regions are placed under the axis, and the inhabitants of the zone, now frigid, are brought back and turned to the equinoctial line, and, at length, the place of the Arctic pole to the Antarctic, and the east to the west, which Herodotus, from the sacred authority and mysterious monuments of the Egyptian priests, testifies to have happened formerly twice, that is, the sun sets where it now rises, and rises as often where it now sets. This not only twice, but also innumerable times, has happened, and will happen in the eternal duration of things, although such a conversion of the stars, in a reduction of all parts into the same situation, requires a revolution of about 36,000 years. Copernicus, it seems, would fain reduce this number to 25,000 years. Oh, how often those have been made a jest of, who ridicule the Egyptians, whose naked bounds they even understood not, unskilled in the purer astronomy. I may safely call them barbarous trawlers, juggling and ensnaring the minds of the little people, with strangely monstrous whims. But from this observation, as that most ingenious man proceeds, on which mathematicians should employ all their care and study, we perceive a singular understanding of nature and admirable providence, that the same part of the earth should not be condemned to so long a cold, but that each and every region might partake in its time of all the aspects of the sun, which, notwithstanding upon account of the slowness of motion and the short life of man, is not discerned. That change of the axis might be also a proof of the force whereby the earth directs itself to a certain part of the eighth sphere, to pass gradually from one to another place of the earth, whence there is a necessity of the climates of regions being changed, and the latitudes of cities, and the situation of sundials placed upon the meridian line. Moreover, the equinoctial line of the earth is changed with the axis, and passes to another part of the earth. But as it is always perpendicular to the axis, if no other change happened, the equinoctial line would be still found under the star of Aries, as it was in the time of Eudoxus, and the equinoctial points would not have moved forward in antecedentia. Notwithstanding that this comes to pass, it is most certain, for now the largest star is the horn of Aries, in which in Eudoxus' time the vernal equinox was placed, with regard to the ecliptic has at least the breadth of 3 degrees toward Pisces, but with regard to the equator it has such a bending that it almost touches the tropic of Cancer. Wherefore it necessarily follows that the ecliptic is changed, which was in the time of Eudoxus. The same change, by an almost parallel reason, holds good with regard to fluids and solids, moisture and dryness, for whatever is sea now was formerly land, and all that is now land will in time to come be sea, the bulk and aspect of the terraqueous globe remaining always the same. This is a new doctrine, I confess, but a very true one, and of this opinion, unless I am mistaken, was, among other disciples of the Egyptians, the Clazomenian Anaxagoras, who being asked whether the mountains of Lampsacum were to be at any time sea, "Yes," says he, "unless time should fail." For he believed that they were partly discovered and partly made by the ebbing of the sea, as we shall explain elsewhere, and that they should be overwhelmed and consumed by its flowing. Wherefore the ocean, not without reason, was called by the ancients Amphitrite, because it environs, tears, and makes a havoc of the earth. The slowness of these conversions carries a face of difficulty when observed by some of the learned, but it is by those who proceed slowly, whereas if the observations are made by the more sprightly, most commonly they become neglected by all, if not finally entirely forgotten. Hence it is that Theophrastus, dying, according to the relation of Tully, is said to have accused nature for having granted a long life to harts and ravens that did not want it, and such a span to men to whom it would be of vast consequence to live longer. And could their days be lengthened, all arts and sciences would be brought to a perfection, and man's life would be improved in all kinds of learning. He, therefore, complained that death seized him when he had just begun to have a glimmering light of these things. We examine now how just this complaint is, neither do we deny the truth of Hippocrates' maxim, "Life is short, but art is long." However, we are not entirely destitute of all help to pass a judgment upon the equinoctial motion, as it is evident to the learned that the same points of the earth turn no more towards the Great Bear, the Lesser Bear, and other fixed stars, which in the time of Hipparchus or even Ptolemy had such a situation, to say nothing of the remarkable changes of shores, islands, and other parts of our globe occasioned by this vicissitude. Far be it from me that I should assert anything that is not proved by experience and reason. It is therefore, then, that I reject every precarious hypothesis and empty conjecture, which are denied with a better right than projected. I discard in like manner, and pass the same impartial judgment upon things granted and not evident or proved, and all such fallacies on which very often lies the whole stress of a demonstration. By this ebbing or declination of the sea I spoke of, which we allow to be more easily proved from the long continuance of time than from observation, certain bodies can be fully accounted for, especially sea bodies, which are found in every part of the earth, and not only buried deeply, but also very often broken from huge rocks and the hardest marble. That these are the real and identical bones, spoils, remains of fishes and other animals, the learned Woodward, after the attempts of some others, has copiously demonstrated, a man of great penetration in these studies, and deserving well of the learned world for his curious observations, and for showing that these are not sports of nature, nor stones of their own kind, nor terrestrial fissures or shells, as many others have idly dreamed. We are to form no other judgment of the scraps of vegetables buried the same way. For all species of stones, as we hinted above, receive their increase, as well as all other vegetables, from a loose fluid matter suitable to them, which matter sometimes shuts up within itself the hard and small bodies that perchance fall in its way, or running into such bodies, if hollow, and by degrees petrifying therein, as in a matrix, finally assumes their form. Thus it is that we must likewise explain the origin of figured stones, as the echites, conchites, and all of the like kind. Esoterics furnished us with a ready explanation, but not the universal deluge, such as there never was, the globe of the earth still remaining, among others the famous Stillingfleet, late Bishop of Worcester, proving this clearly in his Sacred Origins, nor that ever it could be in reality be effected by the separation of parts, whatever way any one should take to explain it. I say this with a due deference to the learning and reputation of Burnet, Woodward, Whiston, and others, who have not exactly understood the narrative, or dived thoroughly into the design of that wise lawgiver Moses with regard to the origin of things and the general flood. Not to say that the history of this Egyptian philosopher concerning the rise, fall, and intermediate vicissitudes of things, abridged afterwards by those that followed him, was superstitiously or sillily rafted from its genuine signification by many, or vastly corrupted by idle jugglers. As the figuration of stones is understood by the Pantheists, so also are the representations of plants and other things impressed upon stones. But trees digged out of heathy grounds and marshy places are deservedly for the most attributed by them to tempests, inundations, earthquakes, and to men who hew them down, which I myself have very often found cut and burned. This is evinced from proper arguments that cannot be now alleged, for we must not here go to the bottom of things, or descend to particulars. Upon these before recited most solidly laid foundations of the immense and eternal universe, the Pantheists build their philosophy and embellish it with all possible perfections. A more subtle explanation of things, and the solutions of phenomenons, are to be met with in our esoterics, it being our design to write at present historically and not physically. End of section 3.